I'm going to show you how to replace the heads and head gaskets on a 1993 John Deere 425. Went ahead and got started already. The head gaskets were leaking. I did already take the heads off. The head gasket, the original head gasket, had a small leak right here that was leaking the fluid, the coolant inside of the head here into the cylinder. This has been taken off. The intake has been taken off. The screws that are holding on the carburetor and the intake have all been taken off. Same thing on the other side. I've got a little bit more cleanup to do right here. Here's kind of a little overview of what I got going on. Here's the new head gaskets right here. Head gaskets, the intake gaskets, the valve cover gaskets, and thermostat gasket here. These are the heads. And here are the what are these called? The valve covers. The heads here, I've taken the time. I've already cleaned those. I've used basically what I used was like a whiz wheel with a Scotch-Brite disc. I cleaned that up. I did a little bit of handwork on the valves here just to knock down some of the carbon. But I've got the driver side and passenger side heads here, and I'm going to be installing those. I'll walk you through that. Okay, so if you look down at this cylinder right here, you see how clean this cylinder is right here. This is the cylinder has been washed out by the leaking antifreeze that had come inside of there. On the opposite side right here, you can see where there's a little bit of carbon still inside of the cylinder. This side had not been leaking, but we just went ahead and we're going to replace them, replace both sides anyways. I'm going to start off by doing the, if you're on the machine, I'm going to start off by doing the right side. As I showed you before, this is the right side. This is the head that came off of the right side that actually had the head gasket that was blown. I went ahead and, like I was explaining to you, I cleaned this off, and this is basically what I used right here. Probably not the most ideal because it's abrasive. It could take too much material off, but if you just do a quick skim coat, it takes the it's just enough to take the gasket off without going too deep. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to install the new head gaskets, but I'm not going to crush them down just yet. Also, the push rods, you want to try to, if you can, you want to try to keep those in order of where they came out of, just so that they looks good there. These right here, these bolts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 bolts. 5 bolts hold down the head. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to drop those in just so that I can get everything to kind of stay in place. Okay, change of plans. I'm actually going to go ahead and try to remove the exhaust. Or at least just loosen it enough to where I can have a little bit more room. So there's two 10mm bolts on one side and there's two 10mm bolts on the other side.
I'm going to cut this off.
Yeah, stop for a minute. Okay, we actually did have to take, if you look inside of there, camera should focus, but right there you'll see those two shiny areas, at least one on the left and one one right next to it. Those are 1/2-inch bolts that are holding the exhaust towards the engine block. Now with that loose, I can have a little bit more room to work and move these heads around just to get them just right without having that exhaust interfere, which it was. As I tilted it one way, it would just get in the way. So that's probably going to be the best bet, is to loosen that up. It might be a little tricky getting it back on, but I don't want to risk damaging the head gaskets. Okay. A couple things I wanted to go over real quick. First thing is to get the heads on properly, there are 2 alignment studs that are on the heads that you put the head gaskets into, and then put those onto the cylinder, onto the deck, and that should give you a nice lineup. I did unscrew or loosen the exhaust so that the exhaust flanges weren't pressing against the heads. Now, if you look down here, there is, like I said earlier, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, there is 5 head bolts. When you're putting the head on, you want to be real careful about the push rods. I did look over the manual. The manual does suggest, like I thought, that the rods are recommended to go back in the original place that they had came from. Underneath of the head, inside of the block, there is actually a small cup where, like a cup and socket, where the rod sits down inside of there, and it actually fits into the cup right here on top of the rocker. You want to be real careful on the left and the right side when you're putting the head down, that as you're tightening the head down, or at least getting it snug, you have to remember that wherever the motor left off, in whatever position, piston 1 or 2, depending on where it was in its stroke, the exhaust or the intake valve may be open slightly. For example, this valve right here, whether it be the exhaust or the intake, has compression on it. So you have to make sure that the head goes down nice and easily, and so that everything is nice and square. Now, back up here, you're going to need a torque wrench, and you're going to need inch-pounds of torque. So the recommended torque on this is starting with 30 inch-pounds of torque, moving all the way up to 186 inch-pounds of torque, and it's going to be in a star-shaped pattern. So if you look back down here, the recommended pattern is starting like a star. So you would start 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then just repeat that pattern until you reach the 186 inch-pounds of torque. Else I think that should be done. Something else that I'd like to do, and it's just my preference. It doesn't have to be, but the valve covers. Obviously, the valve covers are kind of nasty. You know, there's a little bit of oil blow by. There's a little bit of oil that leaks, and of course, you're gonna get dust and grass particles. And since I am replacing the valve cover gaskets, what I would like to do, what I am going to do, is I'm actually going to go ahead and just hit these valve covers with a little bit of engine degreaser. Just regular engine degreaser. Go ahead and let that sit for a minute. I'm using a utility tub in the basement, some hot water, and of course a brush, and I'm going to give them a little bit of a scrub. Valve covers are clean. Now that the valve covers are clean, I'm going to go ahead and put them back on. I'm going to show you real quick what the valve covers look like. This one here is completely clean. Try to get it to focus. In this valley along here, there was some kind of a buildup, probably dirt that had gotten hot and probably turned to more of like a clay. You can see in this one here where I've been using a little screwdriver to kind of break some of that dirt and that whatever the buildup was out. So when I go ahead and I put the valve cover gasket back in, it should make a nice seal. Down here, I did get the two. There's one here. There's one here and there's one here. I did get the two exhaust bolts back up against the block. Those are tight. Moving on to each side, the exhaust flange, the exhaust bolts against the head, those are tight. Everything's ready to go with the head. Everything's been torqued down to spec, like I said before, starting at about 30 inch-pounds of torque, move up to a total of 180 inch-pounds of torque. Again, on this side, the flange bolts are tight, the exhaust flange bolts are tight against the head here. I still have to put the exhaust manifold, the gasket. I will show you how I'm going to do that. But another thing that I wanted to do before I forgot was I wanted to get ready to, and I use a tube here, especially on this older John Deere, the oil drain valve. The oil drain valve is right there. There's a small brass, I would call it a petcock. There's a small brass petcock right there. I usually put a tube to the petcock and let the oil drain down. It's also a good idea to change the filter. Okay, here we are at this point right here. I'm attaching the intake to the heads. You can see that the valve covers have been attached.
Wash my hands.
Radiator hose has been attached. Earlier, before I even put the head on, I did install the thermostat, the thermostat temp gauge. Here's the bolts that I have left for the left side. These are 10mm bolts. If you see here, there's going to be 1, 2 on the other side, 3 and 4. The 2 longer ones go on the back, the 2 shorter ones go on the front. We also have a breather hose here that is gonna go right there where my finger is. This one has a little bit of a tab. You'll be able to see on the intake what side that goes on. From looking at it right now, I don't exactly remember what side that went on, but you'll be able to see where there's like a tang that's built into the intake manifold where that specific gasket goes. I think they make these systems pretty much foolproof so that you can't mess them up. So I'm going to go ahead and finish tightening down these intake bolts, put the carburetor assembly all back together, and I am going to fire it up, and you will see the first fire up after.